So there's been a really big change over just the past 50 or 60 years at the age at which young girls get their first menstrual cycle. I mean, it's been like, how big has that change been? From what age to what age?
Well, from the data we have for some countries, that is what is called a secular change, and it's a trend from in time.
So secular means across time?
Yeah. So, say for some countries we have records into the 1800s, mid-1800s.
So back in the 1800s, how old was the average girl when she had her first menstrual cycle?
It wouldn't have been the same for all populations, but say for those populations for which we have records, it could be 16, 17 years old.
Okay.
And now those same countries are seeing average or medium age at menarche around 12 years old.
So 4 or 5 years different.
That's a huge
So
difference.
something happened.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, the interpretation is that the conditions have improved in terms of nutrition, not only quality but quantity. And there's been great improvements in hygiene and public health interventions like water, potable water,
So is it the amount and kind of
sanitation.
food you have when you're approaching puberty, or is it all through the earlier life that influences this?
Well, the evidence that we have suggests that the influences can be even prenatal.
Prenatal?
But there's also an interaction between prenatal and postnatal influences on age at menarche. But
So what kind of prenatal environments would make menarche come sooner?
well, your prenatal environment is actually your mother's womb.
Right.
So it would.
But I'll bet there's ones that have more food and less food.
That's right. So there is an intergenerational effect in that your mother's womb is working as the environment from which you're getting the signals about the environment and the ecology that you live in. So if you come from a line of women who've been well fed, it's more likely that your signal will indicate good conditions, so to speak.
So just to lay out for me what the signals would say for if several generations were not well fed versus were well fed, what are the two different trajectories? Could you compare them?
The line of women who have not had adequate nutrition or who have faced high burden of parasitic loads or infection, they would have had to allocate their energy to these functions, so they would have allocated less to reproduction.
So that would mean later onset of reproduction.
And then that would have been a later onset of reproduction. So it takes a bit longer to grow and longer to get to maturity. And
but even your grandmother's nutrition and state might influence how old you are when you first have your period?
Well, certainly moms, no? And also there is some plasticity in this, so that there's interactions between what happens in the womb and what happens in the...
So what does plasticity mean?
Plasticity means when a system that is has a genetic basis is able to respond to an environment in different ways. So if
so it's kind of detecting how much nutrition there is and using that information to do something.
That's right. And we don't know very much about the mechanisms behind that signal identification and translation and how that translates into higher...
But there are epigenetic mechanisms apparently that are involved in this. Is
those
that right?
are the hypotheses, yeah. That there
so
are.
it's not the sequence changes, it's the,
no,
the expression
no, it's something
of
more
different
immediate
genes
because
changes.
for sequences to change, we're talking about a long-term
Right.
or a longer-term change, whereas epigenetics and developmental plasticity gives you a much shorter window for action. So the biological systems can respond to their environment in a relatively faster
So
way.
it seems like there are two possibilities here, Alejandra. I mean, one is that natural selection shaped a system to monitor how rich the environment is and change your reproductive strategy and when you have your first reproduction event as a function of that. And the other is that it's all some kind of an accident, basically, and that something about what happens early changes things, but it's not like natural selection shaped a mechanism specifically. Is there a way of telling the difference between these two possibilities?
Yeah, well, the hypothesis is based on the fact that reproduction is very costly, In our species, babies have large brains. They are born with not so well developed. They're artificial, and
So they can't do much for themselves.
they can't do much for themselves. They need a quite prolonged maternal paternal care. And so the rationale is that if you have an environment which is not conducive to energy allocation, then you might as well wait or try to do more with less. So in terms of reproductive events, if you engage in an event with little chances of success, then that's an opportunity lost and energy that is not going to get back. But if your cues and the environment are telling you that it is energetically possible to engage in a reproductive event, then you do.
This is making me think of kangaroos. Let's pause and go on to them in just a minute.